Welcome to the leading podcast for long-term weight management. Subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss an episode. You can connect with Jenny on all social media channels. You can also sign up to the newsletter to receive frequent content and tips for weight loss success.
Hey guys, welcome to the Power Over Food podcast. I am your host, Jenny McDonald, the Food Freedom Fairy, as I am now known, and it is great to be here. I apologise, I have been a little bit slack the last few weeks. I've been getting my book off, and I know you're probably sick of hearing me talk about that, but it is now in the hands of a lovely copy editor who is working her way through it. But all of that and the VIP days and the end of Food Freedom Foundations and obviously my current clients has just left me really busy. Apologies because it's been a few weeks since I recorded a podcast, but here I am and I hope you are well. And first of all, before we dive into today, I would love to ask you a favour. If you are listening to this podcast, which obviously you are, please can you send me a little note to tell me your favourite episode or can you write a review, because there are hundreds of you listening to this podcast each time I release a new one and I don't have that many reviews. So I appreciate it's, we listen in the car and we listen when we're out and about, but I would so appreciate some feedback, a review, just to help the algorithm and to help me spread the word and reach more people. So thank you in advance. And there was one other thing I wanted to let you know. If you are listening to this before the 20th of July, I will be running my last free masterclass before the schools break up here in the UK, because I will be taking a step back for about 5 or 6 weeks while my little one is off school. And that masterclass is how to manifest food freedom. So whether you have enjoyed one of my masterclasses before or whether you are a new follower, please do book on, come along, because I am going to be sharing lots of insightful tips. And even if you have attended one of my classes before, there's always something new to learn, whether that is from myself, from somebody else within the group. It's all delivered via Zoom, so you can chat in the chat, you can unmute yourself and ask questions. And yeah, it's going to be a great evening. So that is Thursday, the 20th of June. I will pop the details in the show notes or come and find me on social media and get signed up. Anyway, today I wanted to dive into emotional and psychological factors that tend to have an impact on our relationship with food, and specifically talking about childhood traumas, childhood connections to not just our relationship with food, but our self-worth, because all of these have an impact on how we move forward with life and with food. For serial dieters and emotional eaters, changing our eating habits can often rely in delving far deeper than any diet plan will ever take you. Even if they say, with mindset support, often beliefs and habits and behaviour are set in childhood. They're rooted to our childhood. So I want to talk about this today, and it was requested on my Instagram. So before we dive in, I just also would like to acknowledge that each person's experience is unique, and the examples that I'll share are just intended to help get you thinking not only about how food was presented to you as a child, but also about your self-esteem, your self-worth, your strive for perfection, to please parents, and so on. Everything we experience as children shapes us to how we live our lives as adults. And one of the common childhood traumas that may affect our relationship with food is emotional neglect. So if we grow up in an environment where our emotions are ignored or invalidated, then we can learn to suppress our feelings. And as adults, that can show up as a way to suppress our feelings might be using food to self-food, to seek comfort, and to seek relief from emotional pain. Now, I appreciate the term emotional neglect might sound quite extreme, and if you class yourself like me, I feel very fortunate. I have what I would see as quite a lovely, lovely childhood in terms of my parents and the love and care I was given. But it can also be subtle ways, such as being told, you're fine, you don't need to cry about it. And talking about our feelings these days is becoming more and more acceptable. But often when I was young, it was all about getting on with it. And as I say, no need to cry, you don't need to feel that way. And these can be passing comments, but as a child, it can invalidate your feelings. And when we suppress our feelings, we may look for other ways to find comfort. So I'm really, really conscious now with Nancy when she says, oh, I feel this way, even if I think, oh, come on, just move on, it's fine. You don't, and I feel like sounds awful, but milking it, I will always take time to say, I completely understand why you might feel hurt, why you might feel sad, and then talk about how she can find a solution to that feeling, how she can move forward with whatever's going on. So for you right now, it just might be worth thinking about, were your feelings validated in childhood? Were you allowed to be upset, allowed to cry, allowed to be angry, allowed to be sad? And just explore that. Now, for those who may have suffered a physical or emotional abuse, may struggle with low self-esteem and low self-worth, and food again can become a source of comfort. And as adults, we know this self-soothing is temporary, but it still takes a lot of time to unlearn. Now, as adults, we can recognize, I'm relying on food because it's my go-to, and this is what I've done since I was a child or since I was a young adult. This is how I live my life. We can recognize it and we can want to change it, but changing it is like the next step along. And this does take time to process those feelings, to work on our self-worth, and to practice new ways of coping, new ways of reacting, and so on. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I'm sharing some information today, but please, please be aware that if any of this resonates with you, it is a process. It's not as simple as knowing this stuff. It is about, okay, let's acknowledge it. Let's sit with that. Let's think about what are the strategies I can put in place to move forward. What support do I need? Now, I have talked many times about growing up in an environment where food was used as a reward or a punishment, and this was certainly part of my upbringing. It was a case of, if you've been good, you can have an ice cream on the way home from school. And I really struggle with this because I hear Nancy say, Mummy, I've been really good, can I have X, Y, Z? And I know she's heard that from my parents, and I really try and remind them not to suggest that food is a treat because she's done something well or good. But they are in their 60s, and well, my dad is 70, and that's what he's known all his life, that it's a treat, it's a reward. Back when my dad was growing up, if at the end of the week he had, I don't know what the currency would be, 10 bob, is it? If he had that money to go and get a lollipop from the shop because he'd been good at school all week, or he'd got a reward from the teacher, then that kind of worked back then because it was so few and far between, and he probably didn't have a snack cupboard. He didn't have access to food with high sugar content. It wasn't a regular thing. It was a real one-off. Whereas now food is of such abundance, particularly here in the UK. I mean, I know that we're still struggling with the cost of living crisis, but food is still of abundance. And actually, the food that is the worst for us can often be bought in bulk really, really cheaply. Did you grow up in an environment where food was used as a reward, where it was a punishment? No, you can't have that. Or you'll go to bed without any dinner because you've been naughty and so on. Because this can lead to real unhealthy associations between eating and your emotions. So I invite you to reflect on that and just take a moment just to scribble down, what do you remember about eating when you were growing up? What were you told about food? Was you very fortunate in terms of food was just food? There was no emotional attachment. There was no punishment around food. It was just a case of you ate when you ate. If you were hungry, you would eat, and you weren't told to clear your plate or anything like that. Or was there lots of attachments to food that actually were not about physical hunger? And just as an aside, I'd just like to say that childhood experiences and even childhood traumas can present themselves differently in each person. So, for example, siblings may grow up with exactly the same messages around food or around self-worth or any of these things, but can respond differently. So I remember years and years ago working with a group of ladies, and one lady said, well, my sister doesn't struggle with her relationship with food. She always maintains a real healthy weight, and she just seems to eat whatever she wants when she wants. So why have I grown up with all of these things about food being a reward and a comfort? And when we talked about that, her sister had received the same sorts of messages, but hadn't internalized it in the same way. And having spoken to her sister did sometimes see food as a treat or a reward, but she did that on such a smaller scale compared to her sister who was working with me. So things can present themselves in different ways. And what we have to remember is as children, all we're doing is trying to learn how to make sense of the world, learn how to behave, what is acceptable, what is mummy doing, nanny doing, how do they behave around food, why do they eat breakfast, not eat breakfast, why do they skip dinner every evening, why are they doing something called fasting, there is literally so much those little ears hear, and they take it in and they have to put it in parts of their brain and go, okay, right, I understand, that's what I do then, or women eat in this way. Like, I remember my mum always dishing up my dad a bigger portion and saying, that's for the worker, or, oh, I'll give your dad an extra piece of whatever. And it was always like my dad went out, he was the manual worker, the hard worker, and he was a man, therefore he needed more food. And whilst, yes, that is correct, it's how that internalizes for the child that's watching that happen. And I'm digressing a bit. So let me get back to the first step to healing your relationship with food is recognizing these things, recognizing the patterns, understanding where they started, and then start to work on strategies to help you repair that relationship with food. And more importantly, the relationship with yourself. Because we often develop these unhelpful beliefs around food and ourselves, and quite often they're even on a subconscious level. So, for example, beliefs around being unworthy or undeserving to have something, or even unlovable. And these beliefs then shape our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions. So, for example, childhood experiences that make us feel unloved or insignificant can lead to seeking validation. If we can't get that validation externally from another person, or we can't validate ourselves and we don't know our own worth at that stage in our lives, or even at this stage in our lives right now, then we find validation elsewhere. And that can be through food or another substance, or spending money, or gambling, for example. So for me, I'm thinking about experiences of being bullied at school. and not being deserving, not being worthy of people's time and attention. And also times when I maybe didn't do so well at particular elements in school. So that made me feel, again, not worthy. I had a big belief that I'm still working on. I think I've let go, but then it still crops up about being stupid, not being good enough. And every time I go to record a podcast, it comes up for me. Who would want to listen to you? You're stupid. What do you know? And I have to just say, thank you, little belief over there, and goodbye. Let's release that again. Let's let it go. But the thing is, when you are stuck in this place of having that low self-worth, that low self-esteem, feeling unworthy and loved, the serial dieting and the emotional eating becomes a bit of a form of self-punishment. It almost reinforces the belief that we're just not good enough as we are. And this is why I'm always talking about working on self-worth. Because self-worth, raising your self-worth, can have far more of an impact on your relationship with food than dieting can. And when you begin to value who you are, regardless of your weight, your shape, your size, then a lot of people find that they actually are, first of all, okay with where they are. And if they do still want to adjust their weight, then they want to take care of themselves in a more loving and nourishing way. So weight loss becomes easier and food freedom becomes easier because you've made that peace within. Now, another powerful belief that can affect our relationship with food is the fear of being seen. We can be very vulnerable. And again, if we experienced as a child judgment, criticism, humiliation in our childhood, we may feel the need to hide or to protect ourselves. And I'm just, again, thinking about childhood. As I said, mine was a good childhood, but my dad was quite strict and quite, I had to get things right at school. So I was criticised, I'm very conscious what I say in case my parents ever listen to this, but not in a negative way, but it was, this is how it needs to be done. And as a child, I internalized it as, if I don't get this right, I've upset other people. I've not been good enough. I've not met those expectations. So food can become a shield, a way to numb those emotions and maintain that barrier between ourselves and other people. Now, another common belief is the need for control. So if you feel that your environment, whether that is now or as a child, felt unpredictable, chaotic, you may seek control through food. This is when rigid rules about dieting and eating can give you that sense of control. And the amount of ladies that say to me, I just need to control some area of my life. I just want to feel in control around food. So to round up, recognizing and challenging these beliefs is, again, an essential part of the healing process. And unfortunately, most will still look to diets to solving their food challenges, which just makes me so sad. But I want you to remember that you are not alone, that there is hope for a more balanced, healthier relationship with food. But the first step comes with acknowledging and addressing where you are with food, thinking about your childhood and your early teens and your relationships as you've gone through life as well, because you might not relate to things that I've talked about today, but then there may have been boyfriends, partners as you've gone through life, or friends that have helped you shape beliefs a little bit later in life around food. But the first step is acknowledging and then taking the next steps towards freeing yourself from the cycle. So have self-compassion. Find support, whether that is from a professional or somebody that you can trust that can guide you on this journey and support you. And if you have any questions, if you would like to share your thoughts or personal experiences, then feel free to reach out, to connect with me on social media. And just remember that everybody's path is unique. I think I said it at the start, but together we can support and empower one another. So that's it from me, guys. I am wishing you a lovely, lovely day, evening, wherever in the world you are. And I hope to see you at my masterclass. And I'll see you all very soon. Take care.